Good afternoon, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm President-elect Mark Moody, filling in for President George Hidalgo, who's vacationing with his family this week. Thanks for joining us. I have some really big shoes to fill in George's absence. I don't know about all of you, but I've been so impressed with how George has risen to the challenge and is leading our club during this pandemic when we can't meet in person. He has certainly been an inspiration to me, and frankly, making me nervous about living up to his fine example, not just today, but when I become club president. Today marks our club's annual meeting for the purpose of electing 6 new club directors. Let me first introduce the 12 candidates who have agreed to place their names in nomination for the 6 openings on our club board of directors. Those elected will serve a 2-year term beginning July 1st. Deb Archer, Brian Baskin, Herman Bauman, Sandy Geller, Jenny Jeffress, Anita Muhammad, Charles McClymans, Valerie Rank, Jen Savino, Scott Strong, Martha Sullivan, and Rob Vandenberg. Let's thank these members for agreeing to stand for election this year. Their names have been included in the newsletter for the past month, and their photos and biographies were included in last Friday's newsletter. Now for the election. Our board has approved the use of an electronic ballot because we cannot meet in person due to the pandemic. Members will be receiving an email by 1 p.m. today from the Rotary office that includes the bios of the candidates as an attachment, as well as a link to the electronic ballot. The ballot requires you to vote for 6 nominees. Please note the ballot can only be submitted if you have 6 names selected. You have until noon tomorrow, November 12th, to click on the link and complete the ballot. Our thanks again to all 12 candidates, and please be sure to respond to the email link and cast your ballot by noon tomorrow. On Veterans Day, we show our respect to those who have served in the U.S. Armed Forces. Veterans Day was originally celebrated as Armistice Day, and it was first issued on November 11th, 1919 by President Woodrow Wilson, 1 year after the end of World War I. We have opening music to celebrate Veterans Day. Bob Dindorf and Jeff Bartell will perform a patriotic medley of the songs of the branches of our armed forces. Jeff's son, Nick, helped with the video production. Let's watch their video.
Over hill, over dale, as we hit the dusty trail, and those caissons go rolling along. In and out, hear them shout, counter march and right about, and those caissons go rolling along. Then it's high, high he in the field artillery. Shout out your numbers loud and strong, for where'er you go, you will always know that those caissons go rolling along. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to foreign shores, we sail at break of day. Through our last night ashore, drink to the foam, until we meet once more. Here's wishing you a happy voyage home. So here's the Coast Guard marching song we sing on land or sea, through surf and storm and howling always be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame and glory too. To fight, to save, or fight and die, aye, Coast Guard, we are for you. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. At 'em now, give 'em the gun. Down we dive, spouting our flame from under. Off with one hell of a roar. We will live in fame or go down in flame. Hey, nothing will stop the U.S. Air Force. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to live our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine. And in closing, a tribute to our newest branch, the Space Force. And thank you all for your service.
Wow, what a fitting and moving tribute. Thank you to the Music Committee for putting together this musical medley with the photos of the 36 members of our Rotary Club who've served our country and of whom we are so proud and whom we honor today. Thanks especially to Jeff and Bob and Jeff's son, Nick. Our club president, George Hidalgo, is also a proud veteran of the U.S. Army and a Gold Star father. All three of his sons have served in our armed forces. Jordan and his family are an example of the many foreign-born and first-generation Americans who serve in our armed forces. I was curious about the role of immigrants in our military, and I did a little research. Immigrants have enlisted in all branches of the U.S. military from the very beginning of our country in the War of Independence. The foreign-born represented half of all military recruits in the 1840s and 20% of the 1.5 million service members in the Union Army during the Civil War. Today, the number of veterans who were born outside the United States stands at approximately 530,000, representing 3% of all the 18.6 million veterans nationwide. Additionally, almost 1.9 million veterans are the U.S.-born children of immigrants. Together, the 2.4 million foreign-born and first-generation immigrants account for 13% of all veterans. You may not realize some of the ways that our club is supporting veterans. We have a Veterans Fellowship group that is chaired by our president, George Hidalgo. They have 36 members in their group and meet monthly via Zoom during the pandemic. They have a common bond, and the fellowship group is a great way for them to stay connected. Non-veterans are welcome to join this group, and it would be a great way to get to know some of them if you don't already. We also have a Veterans Assistance Fund within our Madison Rotary Foundation that was established in 2013 by Phil and Kit Blake. Phil knows firsthand the struggles he encountered as he attended college while serving his country. Phil and his wife wanted to help ease the load of other veterans who are getting a college degree, but who are also running into short-term expense issues. The assistance can help relieve some stress and keep students focused on their studies and in school. Just last month, the Veterans Assistance Fund of our Madison Rotary Foundation distributed over $11,000 in emergency grants to 13 veterans who are attending college full-time. The grants are helping them pay rent, utilities, unexpected medical expenses, books for classes. Here's a quote from one of the students when he heard he received the grant. I can sincerely say that this means more than you know, as times are troubling and a small light in the dark can be so meaningful. It feels good to know that Madison has a community of people who value service members. What a nice note, and our thanks to Phil and Kit for making these grants possible. Thank you again to all our members and all in the community who are serving our country. Next, we're going back to check in with Ellsworth Brown to see how we're doing with this year's Community Grants campaign. Ellsworth?
Good afternoon. Your Friday report again, brought to you by me and my shadow in the background. The good news on this campaign is they were inching forward. New gifts are coming in by the hour. We can give you updated counts as soon as we need to. But the good news is that 40% of those gifts from the beginning of this campaign for community grants are increases. That is a wonderful testament to your commitment to the cause, and I appreciate it very, very much. It may take a week to count, but keep those gifts coming because we will have a final report for you in another week or so. Pat and I have discussed this and can assure you that all gifts that are mailed in will be counted regardless of when they arrive, but only if you mail them today. Today's video may be unexpected for you. It's not the usual nonprofit organization that supplies food or cares for people in the way you might think. Rather, Vogel Brothers Building Company created in the second generation of a four-generation firm, a nonprofit organization, in order to make certain gifts. George Vogel, of course, was the founder. Back in 1875, he moved to Madison from Iowa, and I presume to move from a red to a blue state, but we'll never know. He built wagons, but after cars came along, he decided there was a better thing to build buildings. In fact, some of you may have been in one of his earliest buildings, 1929, the Eastwood Theater. Do you remember that theater? Maybe you've been in it lately. It's called the Barrymore now, and it was the finest theater in Madison in 1929, the first one to show talkies. I looked up talkies, by the way, and I learned that actually all movies now are talkies, to my amazement. And I also know, I'm not stuck in the past really, that the next big thing is going to be color. So watch for it. Color movies are coming out soon. You'll enjoy them immensely. Fourth generation company. In the second generation, they created a 501c3 foundation, small one for their family. And they give all of their gifts within the Madison-Dane County area or in Lakeland, Florida, where they have a small branch of their firm. I remember, and we could probably divide our population in this club between those who never carry things back and forth from school, did not have backpacks, couldn't even buy one. The best thing we ever got was a new box of crayons. I always hoped for one that had bronze, silver, and gold colors in them, and a new pencil box and eraser. That was a way to start school. That's all we needed. Today it's backpacks, and he'll speak to the fact that they are needed even during this pandemic time. It's an interesting effort for a private company, and I think you'll enjoy the video very much. We have given them this past year $3,213 to provide backpacks and school supplies for children who do not have them and might not otherwise have them. And it's an important affirmation of the children as much as it is supplying them things that they need to go to school. So watch the video. I think you'll appreciate it very much. And again, thank you thus far for your contributions. Looking forward to moving the numbers up and including more of you in the future.
This is Jay with Vogel Brothers, and here's another episode of Building Community. Today I come to you from our yard operations. We've supported school supplies for kids for 27 years.
You're looking at thousands of pens, pencils, crayons, folders, papers, and other supplies.
This is a program that started with one neighborhood school and has now grown to 140 schools in the Dane County area. Here we are at one of our first stops.
Another great aspect of this is bringing my kids with to help out.
Are you excited to be delivering school supplies today?
Yes.
Some of you may be wondering whether there's a need for school supplies this year. Having just dropped off some supplies and talked to a local social worker, there's still an incredible demand for school supplies. Whether school's virtual, hybrid, or in class, there continues to be a need to help support families with kids that are not able to purchase all the supplies. Education is extremely important, and giving kids the tools to be able to start the year on the right foot and to bring some normalcy is incredibly impactful to the students, so they can focus on school and not worry about not having what they need to do their work.
The kids insisted on helping with this load. Not quite sure we could get any more boxes in the car.
This is a program that impacts over 21,000 students in the Dane County area. Talk about making a difference. That's making a difference. It's been an honor to be part of the team delivering supplies today to schools. This is Jay Thompson, and let's keep building community.
Jen Savino chairs our Community Grants Committee, and she has an announcement.
Hello, I'm Jen Savino, and I chair this year's Community Grants Committee. I wanted to let you all know that the Community Grants application materials for this year are ready, and the forms are available on our club's website. I would encourage you to take a look at the application materials and look at some of the nonprofits that you're involved with and see if they might be a good fit for applying for funding. Here's a timeline from our annual grants process. The deadline for submitting grant applications is December 1st to our Rotary office. Following that deadline, our 16-member committee will begin the task of reviewing about 100 applications submitted. This will be a little different because of the pandemic, and we've adjusted our committee work accordingly to stay safe. Our work involves a detailed process with visits to a majority of the organizations that have applied. This year, that will mean virtual visits. I'd also like to point out that this committee has a conflicts of interest policy, which states that no member of the committee or his or her immediate family may be serving on a board or be involved in an application from an organization applying for funding. We feel this helps keep the process as fair as possible to all organizations applying for funding. Our committee will report its recommendations to our club board of directors and our Madison Rotary Foundation mid-March. The money generated from the grants program comes primarily from our annual community grants campaign, which is currently underway, and you just heard from Ellsworth Brown, so please be generous in your giving during this fund drive. We can do so many great things collectively with the money that we raise. We also have about 5% of a 3-year average of the market value of our endowment fund, which is used for the grants program. We anticipate awarding about $200,000 in the community in 2021. The application form and materials are on our website and down in the downloadable section. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or the Rotary office. And thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee.
Jen, thank you for that report. Maggie Porter-Kratz is a member of our Community Projects Committee, and she has an announcement.
Hi, everyone. I am just so thrilled by how many people got involved with Socktober. Thank you to everyone who helped collect socks, who bought socks, who dropped them off. A huge shout out to Vicki Inbright at Grace Episcopal Church and fellow Rotarian who collected socks at the food pantry there. She also went ahead and distributed some of the socks to people in need. So thank you. Also a huge shout out to Mary Pat Williams who coordinated moving out, donating socks. They ended up donating over 1,000 pairs of socks to Porch Light. Others of you collected socks, like George, you found socks you were no longer using, and others of you who went out and purchased socks, socks in bulk, individual socks. My car was full of socks for a while, and it made me very happy. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a great day and continue to remember our homeless neighbors.
Thank you, Maggie, for organizing the Socktober campaign, and thanks to all the Rotarians who made contributions to benefit the homeless. Next, we have birthdays to celebrate with a bit of humor and wisdom that complements Rotary's mission. We also encourage members to make an age-appropriate donation to the Mattery Rotary Foundation, rounded up to $100 for our club's Synergy Scholarship Fund. November 8th, Tom Lucas. Tom celebrated his 98th birthday, and he was among the veteran members recognized at the beginning of our meeting. A special hello to Tom, who is listening to today's meeting, thanks to Cheryl DeMars, who helped connect him to our meeting. Don Helfrecht is also tuning into today's meeting thanks to Donna Beastman, so a special hello to Don as well. November 9th, Ann Neveser. November 10th, Richard Enteman. November 10th, Mary Pat Williams. November 11th, John Hayes and Deb Lang, also on November 11th. November 12th, past President and singer extraordinaire Bob Dindorf. November 12th, Mike Franzen. November 12th, Anita Muhammad. November 13th, Tim Conroy. November 13th, past President Carl Wellenseek. And November 14th, past President Wes Sparkman. Thanks to our celebrants for your contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Please join me in wishing them a happy birthday and a bon voyage for their next trip around the sun. Elaine Mishler will play Happy Birthday. We held our monthly board meeting on Monday, November 2nd, the day before the election, on Zoom. And I encourage all our members to review our board minutes that we post in the member login tab of our club's website. We also want our members to see our current board members in person, or as close to that as we can get during the pandemic. So we asked one board member to introduce a speaker each month. This month, Paul Hoffman will make the introduction. Paul is president and CEO of Monona Bank. He is in the second year of a 2-year term on our club board of directors. Paul will now come forward and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mark. It's my honor to introduce the speaker today, Brigadier General Joane Mathews, who 2 years ago assumed her current duties as Adjutant General for the Wisconsin Army National Guard. Her military education includes Army Aviation Officer Basic and Advanced courses, Combined Arms and Services Staff School, the Command and General Staff College, the U.S. Army War College, Joint Task Force Commanders Training Course, and the National Security Management Course. Her military awards include the Legion of Merit with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, the Meritorious Service Medal with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Army Commendation Medal with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Army Achievement Medal and National Defense Service Medal, which is her second award, a Master Aviator Badge, as well as other federal and state awards. She's going to provide us with a Veterans Day message that touches on the sacrifices and honor of veterans past and present. She will also speak about the Wisconsin National Guard's unprecedented efforts this past year, and how the citizen airmen and soldiers of the state of Wisconsin have answered the call amidst the largest sustained mobilization for domestic support in the state's history. We look forward to hearing her presentation. If you have a question for our speaker today, be sure you use the chat function in YouTube and ask your question. And Mark will be monitoring the chat and will ask questions of our speaker. Let's welcome General Mathews.
Thank you, Paul, for that warm introduction. And thank you, Mr. Moody and members of the Rotary Club, for inviting me today and giving me the opportunity to speak with you, to commemorate Veterans Day and pay tribute to all of those who have served in our nation's armed forces. Veterans Day is a day to celebrate all those who have answered the call to service, whether in peacetime or during times of war. Veterans Day came into existence with the signing of the armistice that ended the Great War, dubbed by many as the war to end all wars. It was first called Armistice Day because on November 11th, 1918, the great powers of World War I signed the armistice that officially ended hostilities after 4 years of brutal combat that claimed the lives of millions of people. 102 years later, the Great War is now known as World War I, because sadly, it was not the war to end all wars. Just 20 years later, the world once again plunged into an even costlier conflict. And this year marks 75 years since the end of the Second World War. The United States, of course, played crucial roles in bringing about the conclusion of both wars. And as has been true throughout American history, our veterans fought and served valiantly to serve freedom and the American way of life in both world wars and conflicts before and after. Millions of Americans have answered the call and served in places like Guadalcanal, Anzio, at the beaches of Normandy, Korea, in the jungles of Vietnam, the hot deserts of Iraq, and in the mountains of Afghanistan. Others have served in peacetime, standing ready at hotspots around the world to ensure peace and security when world loomed as a real threat. All are veterans, and all deserve our undying gratitude for their service and sacrifice. No matter how these soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, or Coast Guardsmen served, they all, at some point, raised their right hands and swore an oath to protect this country at all costs, up to and including giving their lives, if necessary, to defend our republic. It takes a special kind of person to have the courage to wear this nation's uniform, to stand ready, to answer the call when needed. Those who have deserve our respect and our praise. Today, we honor them, and we honor their brothers and sisters who made the ultimate sacrifice so we could have a life that's free. As U.S. Army veteran Charles M. Province once wrote, "It is the soldier, not the minister, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of press. It is the soldier, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the soldier, not the campus organizer, who has given us freedom to protest. It is the soldier, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is the soldier, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It is the soldier who salutes the flag, who serves beneath the flag, and whose coffin is draped by the flag, who allows the protester to burn the flag. All who have worn this uniform have sacrificed. They cared so deeply about this nation that they left their families, put their lives on hold, tabled college plans, and more, all to protect and serve the nation we all hold so dear. There are few among us who have the courage to answer that call. Those who have served in our armed forces are a rare and treasured breed. Many from our own state have answered that call. Today I'd like to pay tribute to all of them. Our friends, our neighbors, who, when the call came, did what their nation asked of them. As a member of the Wisconsin National Guard, I am particularly proud of the noble legacy of our organization. Our legacy begins in the days before Wisconsin even achieved statehood, when its earliest militia helped protect what was then Wisconsin territory. Just 12 years before becoming a state, Wisconsin sent more than 90,000 off to the Civil War, where storied units like the Iron Brigade earned accolades at places like Antietam and Gettysburg. Years later, it was soldiers from the Wisconsin Army National Guard who made up the now famous 32nd Red Arrow Division that went on to great fame in the First World War after smashing through enemy lines on the battlefields of France in 1918. Their reputation for tenacity in combat earned them the nickname Les Terribles, meaning the terrible ones, as they pierced every German line they encountered during that war. In World War II, the Wisconsin Army National Guard 32nd Division once again played a starring role as its troops spent 654 days in combat, fighting through the dense jungles of New Guinea and the Philippines, more than any other division in the world. Thousands of Wisconsinites would go on to serve in Korea, Vietnam, and in the years since the terror attacks of September 11, 2001, in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Nearly every unit in the Wisconsin Army and Air National Guard has mobilized multiple times, and more than 25,000 troops have mobilized for deployments to the Middle East and Afghanistan since 9/11. 2020 has been no different. In fact, for the Wisconsin Army National Guard, 2020 marks a watershed moment in our proud history as our soldiers and airmen have answered the call time and time again for both state and nation. Since last Veterans Day, more than 1,200 Wisconsin National Guard soldiers and airmen have either deployed overseas or returned from overseas. Late last fall, approximately 400 soldiers from our 2nd Battalion, 127th Infantry returned from Afghanistan after a year-long deployment serving as a security element. They were replaced in Afghanistan by 400 fellow Wisconsin National Guard members from the 1st Battalion, 128th Infantry, who completed their own deployment there and recently returned to Wisconsin. The 829th Engineer Company, based in Spooner and Ashland, also returned from a deployment that served 21 bases spread across 7 countries, ranging from Afghanistan and Iraq to Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. They improved existing facilities, completed construction projects to include building a COVID hospital in Afghanistan, and deconstructed facilities that no longer needed for the mission. Approximately 160 soldiers from the 32nd Red Arrow Infantry Brigade Combat Team completed a successful deployment to Ukraine, where it oversaw advisors helping to train the Ukrainian army. A group of aviators from a West Bend-based unit deployed to the Middle East this summer to conduct a medevac mission, while fellow Wisconsin National Guard units like the 924 Engineer Detachment and the 1967th Contracting Team deployed to Kuwait and the Horn of Africa, respectively. By all accounts, 2020 was a busy year for federal overseas deployments, but that only scratches the surface of what our state and nation has asked of the Wisconsin National Guard this year. In March, as we all know, the pandemic, COVID-19, reared its head, and our citizen soldiers and airmen were up for the challenge. At one point, more than 1,400 soldiers and airmen were mobilized in support of the state's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Their duties included COVID-19 testing, staffing a state call center to notify people of their test results, providing mortuary affairs support to a county medical examiner's office, managing a warehouse that handled critical PPE or personal protective equipment shipments around the state, staffing a self-isolation facility with medics and administrative support, filling in at a senior living facility after a COVID outbreak resulted in a staffing shortage, and transporting people exposed to COVID on a cruise ship back home to isolate. More than 700 remain on duty across Wisconsin as we speak, running COVID-19 testing sites for their fellow citizens, their neighbors, in our own communities, here at home. To date, they've administered more than 800,000 COVID tests statewide, and the number continues to grow. Just this past week, more than 400 Wisconsin National Guard members staffed polling locations across the state during the presidential election amidst a shortage of poll workers due to COVID-19 fears. November's election represented the fourth such instance since April that National Guard members staffed the polls. In April's election, more than 2,400 Guard members answered that call and served in 71 of 72 Wisconsin counties, performing the same roles and duties as traditional poll workers. Smaller amounts of Guard members perform the same roles in elections in May and April as well. They perform such duties as issuing ballots, registering voters, monitoring voting equipment, explaining voting procedures, greeting voters, and answering general voting questions, directing voter traffic in the polling sites, and serving as tabulators. The Wisconsin National Guard also mobilized on 4 separate occasions across the spring, summer, and fall as civil unrest broke out across Wisconsin counties, cities, towns. More than 1,200 mobilized to Milwaukee, Madison, Racine, Kenosha, and Green Bay in the weeks following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Another 150 mobilized again in late June when unrest broke out around the state capitol in Madison. In Kenosha in August, more than 2,000 supported local law enforcement efforts to preserve public safety after an officer-involved shooting there. And another 500 answered the call for assistance from Wauwatosa in October after a charging decision in a case there. 2020 has been a busy year in the history books of the Wisconsin National Guard, and your citizen soldiers and airmen have been ready to answer that call. Every single call that came, they answered. In Wisconsin, the National Guard is made up of 10,000 citizen soldiers and airmen who live and work in nearly every county across Wisconsin. We're your friends, we're your neighbors, your co-workers, your employees, many even your kid's baseball coach. Yet our soldiers and airmen also serve in uniform. Nearly all of our National Guard members serve in a part-time role until we're mobilized for an emergency or an overseas deployment. As civilians, many of them work for people like you, own their business, work as plumbers, welders, teachers, nurses, or other professions. They balance their professional careers with their family lives and their military service. It's remarkable when you stop and think about it. Depending on their military role, some could say that they have 2 full-time jobs. But we could not do what we could do without the unwavering support of our families and also our employers who grant our troops the flexibility to serve and ensure they have meaningful employment waiting for them when they return from a state or federal mobilization or military training. Many of you have Guard members who work with or for you. So I just want to say that we're grateful for that continued support because a lot is asked of our service members. And having supporting employers is a big part of ensuring our soldiers and airmen can do their military jobs effectively. There are many ways to become a veteran, but one thing is common in every case. At some point in their lives, every veteran, no matter the role they play, where they served, or how they served, all took an oath to support and defend our nation, its Constitution, and our people. And they were all willing to lay their lives on the line to do so. Every veteran did what their country or their state asked of them when their call came. And for that, we are forever grateful to all our veterans. So on this Veterans Day, as we honor all those who have served and sacrificed on our behalf, I ask that you honor their service and their legacy by cherishing our nation and the great gift they've secured for you. While our nation's political climate may seem divided, this is a great nation, and we're lucky to have been born American. But this country is great because generation after generation of Americans dating back to our heroic origins in the Revolution have been willing to lay down their lives, if necessary, to protect it, and to pass on the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to the next generation. Without the service and sacrifice of our nation's veterans, we may not have the freedoms and prosperities that we take for granted every day as Americans. In this country, we're free to do as we choose in this life. We have the opportunity to live a life of our choosing. We elect our own leaders. We have a say in how our government is run. We worship however we choose. we can criticize our government. That is not true in many places around the globe, and we often forget how special and unique that level of freedom is in this world. So cherish the gift you've received, and remember how lucky you are simply by virtue of having been born American. Perhaps more importantly, remember that the freedom you have is not free. It was bought and paid for by the service and sacrifice of the countless Americans who put their lives on the line to make it so. I ask you to pause and reflect on all you've been given in your life. And I ask that you thank the veterans in your life, because while they may seem ordinary people to you, there's something extraordinary, and our nation owes them a debt of gratitude that we can never repay. Thank you for this opportunity to allow me to speak to you today, and thank you for your continued support and service that you all continue to provide to our communities. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, General Mathews. We are very honored to have you here today, and we also want to thank you for your service to our community and our nation, and for your eloquence in describing how the members of our armed services have made what we take really generally for granted possible. So thank you to you and all of your peers and colleagues.
Thank you.
There were also a number of thank you comments posted in the chat, as well as some questions.
Okay.
So I'd like to start with a couple of that. First question from Melinda Heinrichs was, what do you think of compulsory military or national service? Do you think that common experience and sacrifice could be an ingredient in unifying America?
Can you rephrase the question? Or
Yeah, so the question is, what is your view? Would compulsory service, whether it's military or civilian service, help bring our country together?
Oh, I'm a strong advocate for volunteering and helping our communities, for serving in any way that you can. Everybody has their unique skills. Everybody has their unique strengths. And I think the more we come together and help each other out, the better world we can become.
Thank you. Another question was, how many National Guard members of the National Guard here in Wisconsin contracted COVID-19 as a result of their service this year? Do you know?
We do keep track of that, but I think it's been about 70.
Have there been any fatalities?
None, not in Wisconsin.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me see. Here's another question. Let's see. Maybe you could just explain briefly what the difference in training is between someone who's a regular active duty member of the service versus the National Guard.
Sure, but I just want to go back to that other question.
Sure.
When the question that was asked about how many have contracted COVID-19. What we've been finding is when they are contracting COVID-19, it's not when they're on mission. It's not when they're with their employees or their coworkers. It's when they're out and about. Yes, okay. Yes. Because we make sure that we follow every CDC guidelines. And then the second question was?
Yeah, just briefly, the difference in training between someone who's in active duty and someone who's in the National Guard.
The training is the same. We follow the same regulations. We follow the same policies and procedures and training requirements. What makes it more challenging for National Guard is we drill 1 week in a month and 2 weeks out of the year, and we have the same requirements that an active duty member has when they're 24/7, 365.
Basic training is the same?
Basic training is the same. We all train together. Active duty, reserve, component are all together.
That might be a good lead in. You mentioned earlier how important it is the support that employers give and make it possible for the National Guard. And you just described the training requirements. So maybe you could just elaborate a little bit more. How can employers be supportive and helpful in you achieving your mission and the success of the National Guard?
Boy, I have so many great stories of employer support. And as mentioned, we would not be able to do our job without that support, because when we're off doing mission, if we don't have to worry about, the work or the family for that matter, all those different things that are going on at work, if you don't have to worry about that and somebody else is picking it up, and that's why we appreciate the employers, is because we recognize when there's one body gone, that one body might be doing two jobs depending on, you know, how efficient they might be, and then that employer has to backfill that position. So just being supportive of them and understanding, and to also know that sometimes we get these no notice calls. Indicative of 2020, we've got, you know, the civil unrest and all the other state active duty missions we have had this year. We didn't get a lot of forewarning, and it's one night and you got to report the next day. So that employee has to call the employer and say, I need to go on state active duty. And so just have that understanding that it's not really the employee's fault. It's just the needs of the state at the time.
Well, I'm retired, but I will say that in my last job, we had a couple of members of the National Guard, and one of whom was deployed to Afghanistan for over a year. And while it represents a bit of an adjustment, my experience has been that the members of the National Guard who we've employed were outstanding employees and exemplary employees, and it was absolutely worth keeping their jobs for them for when they came back.
I appreciate that. I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's not only supporting them while they're deployed, but it's also supporting them when they return, because when you're gone for a year, a lot changes. So there's a lot of mental stress that occurs when a service member returns home.
And often trauma.
Right.
Military service seems to tend to run in families. Is that the case in your family? What prompted you to decide to serve our country?
My father served in the Army, and I'm Native American, and that's our culture. We all serve either for a minimum few years. I'm one of the first in my family to retire. My brother served in the Marines. I've had several uncles and cousins and many relatives who've served. The reason I joined is I always had an interest in the military, but I was getting my college degree and I was paying for it out of my own pocket, and my pocket was getting empty. So I applied for an ROTC scholarship, and I was able to get my college paid for, and I was able to graduate with my degree and as well as my fixed wing certification and helicopter certification, which was expensive. So all I had to do was sign up for 6 years, and I enjoyed every minute of it, and 30 years later, I'm still serving.
Yeah, well, it certainly does confirm that it runs in families, doesn't it? A question for you, and I think it actually keys off the last thing you just said. Are you finding it challenging to recruit to the Army National Guard?
Not at all. I mean, even now, because people know that we're out in the community and people know that we're willing to step up, and there's a lot of soldiers that, we've had a pretty good recruiting year this year, and I thought we wouldn't because of the pandemic. It's very difficult for our recruiters to be in the high schools and the colleges. They actually cannot go in. So we're doing a lot of online recruiting, and we haven't had any difficulties, thankfully.
Is there an age limit to when people can first enlist in the National Guard?
They have to be 18.
They have to start early.
Yep, they do. There's some that start younger, but while they're in high school, but obviously they got to get the parents' blessing and signature.
But in terms of, is there a top age, a maximum age that people can?
Maximum age of joining?
Yes.
There is a maximum age, but that depends on, and that changes. I really can't say for sure what that age is.
Young adults graduating from college, or even once they've been in the labor market or out of high school for years, it's certainly not too late for them to consider the National Guard.
Not at all.
Okay, great.
And people who have left the military, we always offer them, they can come back.
Okay. Let me see if any more questions have come online. Let's see. That looks like there is one here. How will the Wisconsin National Guard weigh difficult choices that may be coming to them as this election plays out? For example, and this does potentially put you on the spot, and you may not want to answer, but what if the President and Secretary of Defense ask you to defy the election results certified by the state of Wisconsin?
Well, we serve at the call of the governor, and if the governor asks us to do it, we just need to make sure that it follows our guidelines on what we can and cannot do. the way the system works is we are usually the last person to be called. So if there is an issue in the city, for example, for if there's flooding, the city uses their own resources, volunteers, other organizations within that city, and if it gets bigger and they can't do what they can do to support their community members, then they reach out and they contact Wisconsin Emergency Management, and they keep going through all the different levels of support. And if they reach the end, then they call the Wisconsin National Guard, and then we support in whatever aspect that they'd like us to support.
Now, are there also then agreements among states and between states that National Guard units from other states could come to Wisconsin, or you could be deployed to a different state?
Yes, there is agreements. It's called emergency. It stands for EMAC, but I can't remember what it stands. It's EMAC, and I can't remember what it stands for. But if there was an emergency, for example, we went down to Florida to support the hurricane reliefs, there has to be a document. It's like a memorandum of agreement that the two states agree on, and then we can support. But it's not a constant thing. It's when the disaster
So they would
occurs.
request, and then our governor would approve,
Correct.
or vice versa.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you. There was a question. Are any members of the military participating in any COVID-19 vaccine trials as part of their military status?
Not as part of their military status.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's get one more
Sure.
chance for any questions. I think that's all the questions
All
we
right.
received. Let me see if I have any more here. Oh, yeah, here's a good question for you, please. We all know that suicide is a serious problem among veterans. And nationally, I think there's something like 20 veterans committing suicide each day. How are you addressing that challenge within the Army National Guard?
We have several folks that are on staff, civilian and military, that help our members, and we also train our soldiers in assisting those service members who have suicidal ideations. So we try to prevent that final act. So we have many levels of support that we have throughout our state. Hope that answers your question. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me.
General, thank you so much for your presentation and for being with us today. And thank you to all who attended our meeting online. With that, we are adjourned.